World Trade Center. American Airlines number 77, Washington to LA, confirmed hijacked and crashed. United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767, Boston to LA, confirmed crashed. United Airlines 93, Boeing 757, confirmed hijacked and crashed. Newark to San Francisco, that is the one, a 757 that crashed in Pennsylvania. One of the American networks, ABC, is reporting, although not confirmed, that Flight 175 this is confusing. I'm not sure. That was the one from Boston to LA. There's some confusion as to what happened to it after it was hijacked, so we will follow up on that. The Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, issuing a statement that such inhuman acts will not go unpunished. A name that we have heard many times in the last couple of years associated with acts against the United States, Osama bin Laden. The Afghan Taliban say that Osama bin Laden could not be responsible for the attacks in the United States. Why they say that is unclear at this hour. All right. All right, just being notified that we have somebody else joining us now, this time from Quebec City. It's days like this that you're obviously dealing with a lot of rumor, innuendo, reports that are changing almost by the minute, although this one is not. The pictures don't lie. There is no rumor to them. There's been a terrible incident in the major American city of New York, also in Washington. There are expected to be thousands of deaths associated with them. Aircraft crashing into the World Trade Center in New York City. Both towers are down. In Washington, at the State Department and the Pentagon building, incidents as well. Aircraft down near Camp David and in Pennsylvania. The President of the United States on his way back into the White House to handle this. Jean-Sébastien Rioux joins us from Quebec City today, who is an expert at Laval University in monitoring situations like this and the kind of actions that take place, the kind of security that has to be associated with trying to deal with them. And I'm wondering, Mr. Rioux, what you can tell us after what you've witnessed and what you've heard. How do you gauge the situation at this hour?
Well, I have no idea if words can express the tragedy and the horror of what we've just saw, the two Twin Towers collapsing. I'm trying to recollect here, in time of peace, when there hasn't been a world war or something like that, I can't think of a single tragedy of that magnitude.
No, I think you are absolutely right there. There is no comparison to this, and as we heard from somebody a little earlier today, it's almost wrong to be discussing this as terrorism. This is war. Jean, before I go back to you, this is one of the remarkable shots taken before the collapse of the World Trade Center. This is on top of one of the towers, above the area where the first aircraft hit, at a time when they were trapped. I heard one of them talking on a telephone to a radio reporter saying there was nowhere he could go. The elevator shaft was destroyed. He was desperately hoping for help, and you can see people waving from windows, had to smash out windows to show officials on the ground who were helpless at this point that they were stranded. Now, what happened to these people, we do not know. We know some of them did make their way to the roofs. They were obviously hoping that helicopters could get there, but in the chaos that surrounded this moment and in the 90 minutes or so they had before the building collapsed, it is unknown if any were able to be rescued. Those were the people trapped in the area above where the first aircraft hit the tower. Clearly in the area below the aircraft, some people did manage to get out. How many, we do not know. United Airlines has just now confirmed that it has a second one of its aircraft down. It is not saying where. or what the situation is on that front. Jean Rioux, let's get back to the security matter at hand and how a government, we haven't heard from anybody in the U.S. government 3 hours now since the president gave his initial reaction to the shock and horror of what happened, which assumes, we have to assume that they're still in the middle of crisis management trying to deal with the threat underway. What kind of things would be happening there right now? Do we still have Jean Rioux in Quebec City? We've lost that line, and we will try to get it. We'll try to get it back. Do we have David Holton in Washington standing by? So David, come back into this conversation with whatever you've managed to gain in terms of information in the last little while.
Well, very little, Peter, because there's extraordinary silence in official Washington now. The normal sources you'd expected to be reacting, the FBI, the CIA, State Department, there's just no word coming out of those agencies right now, perhaps because of the simple fact that many of those buildings, of course, were evacuated in an enormous rush beginning about an hour, 45 minutes ago in some cases. So really there's a kind of extraordinary and unusual blanket silence over here. But the one thing we did hear from was an unusual comment from Laura Bush, the president's wife, coming out of a Senate committee hearing earlier this morning, who said to appeal to all parents across the country to reassure their children that they were safe. Well, I don't think that reassurance will have a huge effect right now, given the fear and shock and disbelief over these attacks this morning. Also, one rare quote from Senator Chuck Hagel, a Republican from Nebraska, with a very graphic quote just a few moments ago. This, he said, is a second Pearl Harbor. I don't think I can overstate it. A reference, of course, to the Japanese attack on the U.S. Naval Air Base that brought the U.S. into the Second World War. Clearly, officials will be trying desperately to find out who is responsible. Some indication abroad that a lot of countries are worried that there might be U.S. reprisal raids. The Taliban representative in Afghanistan very quickly condemned the attack, perhaps concerned that there might be some U.S. attack against Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. That, of course, is speculation at this point, but clearly the Taliban worried enough to rush out with this statement saying that the Taliban condemns these acts of terrorism as an inhumane tragedy.
One assumes that they've got to be working on two levels in Washington right now. One is trying to grapple with the situation at hand and just where in the situation they are, because it's clear that things are still ongoing with the United Airlines now just announcing that it's in fact lost yet another aircraft. They won't say where or how. So they're working on one level to try and deal with the situation that's at hand, and on the second level trying to figure out how this happened, who's responsible, and what and when they're going to respond to it.
And the priority, Peter, is clearly dealing with the aftermath of the tragedy, the victims in New York and elsewhere. That has to be the priority at this stage. One senses that the official agency are somehow looking desperately, as I said earlier, but not being aware of the facts at this stage of the game. You remember February 1993, I was standing outside the World Trade Building. You talked to me a few hours there, and we were all horrified when we learned that there were 6 people killed and about 1,000 injured there, and we were describing it, I remember in a talk back with you, as one of the worst acts of terrorism, foreign terrorism on U.S. soil in history. And yet this act today, these acts, plural, are obviously of a far, far greater magnitude, simply can't be compared, which will just exacerbate the horror and the disbelief that a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world will be feeling right now.
Now, you mentioned the Pearl Harbor comparison. 3,500 Americans died on that day, approximately. The fear here, and when you hear the comments of Mayor Rudy Giuliani of New York, is that the toll is going to be quite possibly considerably higher than that. And this whole issue of under attack from where, by whom, and what to do about it is obviously going to dominate the schedule in Washington for some time to come. But as you say, and as we've been saying for some time, first of all, they've got to come to grips with the situation. Obviously, the care for the wounded and the retrieval of the dead, but also where in this situation are they? The smoke still hovers over New York City from the debris rising into the air from the World Trade Center, and here you see again, as it shortly after 9 on the West Coast now here, and just for those who are just joining us, video of the second attack on the World Trade Center by a hijacked aircraft, just right into the heart of the second tower. Within 90 minutes from that point, both towers had collapsed under the strain of the damage that had been done structurally to both towers. On a normal day, as we have reported, 50,000 people work in those buildings. It's expected that at that hour of the day, at least 20,000 were in their offices when this took place. And obviously, the resulting damage it's just almost too hard to comprehend. Aside from New York City, there have been attacks in Washington, both outside the State Department and the Pentagon building. Part of the building, the Pentagon building, has collapsed, we're told. There are casualties, but we are not sure how many. There have been aircraft down in a number of other locations in the United States. In Pennsylvania, a 757 down. We believe it was hijacked. Why it crashed and where it crashed, or exactly why it crashed, we are not sure. Did it run out of fuel? Was it aimed into the ground? Was it shot down in a defensive reaction? This is the scene from Pennsylvania, the first pictures we've had access to. Unfortunately, sorry, that we're told is another one. That one was in Colorado. Details on that one we are not aware of yet, and we're putting them together as fast as we can. Aircraft crashing in 4 or 5 different states now. That we're aware of. The worst scene here in New York City, where aircraft were directed straight into the World Trade Center towers. One has to assume, with these events still unfolding, that the reason we are not hearing anything official from the U.S. government or any of its agencies is, other than the FAA or trying to monitor aircraft movements, is that they are still very much in the situation of trying to deal with what is happening, that there are still events unfolding. Let's look back at those pictures. They were, in fact, from Pittsburgh, or near Pittsburgh, about 80 miles from Pittsburgh, where a 757 went down. Appears to be in a field. We're told in Somerset County. You can't see too much from those pictures, other than a massive hole in the ground, and emergency crews trying to deal with the situation. 757 is one of the newer version Boeing aircraft. It's not the big jumbo, huge jumbo 747 aircraft, but it is nevertheless a major aircraft as well. That map showing you from the local Pennsylvania station just where this took place. The European community has called for an extraordinary meeting of European foreign ministers tomorrow in Brussels. We're just being told of that. Just looking at more details coming over the wires of different details on the aircraft involved, but we're still trying to trace what this latest story is of an air crash in Colorado. We don't have the details yet. The airport in Los Angeles, California, where a number of these aircraft had been originally destined to before they were hijacked, we have told is just being evacuated. That is an enormous airport. It joins the ranks of the other airports that have obviously been shut down, but in this case, LAX is being evacuated, or is in the process of being evacuated at this hour. So the situation is still very much ongoing, and U.S. officials and officials around the world still trying to come to grips with this. Brazil had a number of aircraft leaving from different Brazilian airports heading towards the United States. It has recalled all of those passenger aircraft. They have all gone back and landed in Brazil. Just an example of the kind of situation that's happening all around the world at this hour. People stunned at what's been going on as we look at pictures from Washington, a number of emergency meetings going on inside the White House area, although major parts of the White House have been evacuated. David, you're still on the line. What is the actual situation there? Is it sort of non-essential workers that have been moved out of the White House, or is the whole building emptied out now?
Well, not only from the White House, the West Wing was evacuated earlier, but a number of other federal buildings, Justice included, the Capitol building, the Pentagon, of course, even before the bombing attack on the Pentagon itself, have been cleared out. Crossing over the bridges earlier, they'd actually closed off a couple of the bridges. I tried to get back earlier today from National Airport to the center part of Washington. They'd closed off the bridges. They are now opened again. Mainly for people evacuating. In fact, the bridges are absolutely just completely packed with cars. Many of the roads coming out of Washington are completely jammed, so that gives some indication of the situation here. But it's right across the country. This is what, the graphic indication of the magnitude, Peter, of this crisis is that measures are being taken right across the country. In Chicago, the big Sears Tower skyscraper has been evacuated. Other high-rise buildings across the country evacuated. Anti-terrorism divisions activated in just about all the major cities in the U.S. So precautions are being taken in places where there haven't yet been any indication of terrorist activity.
All right, new information coming in also from the American capital in Washington about the Pentagon situation as we continue to monitor live the pictures from New York City. But in Washington, the new details on the Pentagon collapse. It's now being reported that part of the Pentagon that collapsed was between the 4th, 5th, and 6th corridors. What that means in real terms is that is the Army section of the Pentagon, the Army section that controls planning and logistics. And it is assumed that at the time of that incident, that leaders from the U.S. Army were presumably working in their offices. We are told there have been casualties, the details of which we do not know. Hospitals in both Washington and New York desperately asking for blood donations in both cities. I don't want to overstate this, but it's at times like this when a certain calming is needed. We've heard from Mayor Rudy Giuliani in New York City begging for calm while at the same time talking about the horrendous death toll expected. Out of the U.S. government at this hour, still no official comment beyond the remarks that the President of the United States made about 3 hours ago when he first indicated that it was an apparent terrorist act. What Americans and the rest of the world can only go with right now are the kind of comments they're hearing on their various television networks, and that they're hearing from civic officials like Giuliani and from airport officials and airline officials. The fact that nobody has come out in some way does speak volumes about the fact that they are still really unclear what to say on one hand, or also that they're still very much involved in trying to deal with the situation. But it's at a time like this that I was going to say that things can be overstated. Well, it's awfully hard to overstate what we've seen already happen today. But the issue is whether or not and when somebody from the American government is going to step forward to give as much detail as they can about what they know and what they fear and what they're doing to handle the situation. At this time, it's David, I don't know, stop me if you don't agree, but it does seem remarkable to me that nobody at any level beyond the President, who was out much earlier with very basic comments, has stepped forward to say anything yet. We can't hear David. If we can open David's mic there.
It's quite remarkable. There's just been a blanket of silence coming out of official Washington since these attacks began. Strangely, one of the few statements that has come out from from the government has come from the Federal Reserve, obviously trying to sort of calm any possibility of financial panic setting in. They've just put out a statement saying that the Federal Reserve stands ready to provide additional money to banks if needed. They also said the Fed is open and operating. The discount window, they say, is available. All this, one suspects, to calm the financial markets. Not that that is possible after a grim situation like this, but here's the Fed coming out with a guarantee that they will make additional money to banks if needed. Obviously an effort to prevent any financial panic setting in the wake of the bombings.
All right. A number of things that have, in fact, though, been shut down. David quite rightly pointing out the U.S. Reserve's announcement of just a few moments ago. The stock markets, the financial markets in the United States have closed. Both the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ have closed for the day. NASA has shut down its facilities at Cape Canaveral in Florida, the Kennedy Space Center. Closed at least for the day, with the concerns that are obviously evident throughout the United States. Let's, as we watch the situation they've also closed the U.S.-Mexico border as well, and as we said, there are a number of tough security measures taking place at the Canada-U.S. border in different parts of the country. Let's go into New York City as we watch these pictures. Canadian Steve Irwin, who works in New York now, has joined us by phone and is right in the heart of Manhattan where all this is unfolding. And Steve, give us the eyewitness report of the moment.
Peter, I'm about 6 or 7 blocks away from where the World Trade Towers stood. I can tell you, just last weekend I was down here and it dominated the skyline. I can't see it anymore. The sky is completely blotted out. It looks like a tornado is actually coming up from lower Manhattan. It's been a horrific scene. I got here just moments after the second tower went down. People are stunned. They've been fleeing out of Manhattan in a fairly calm way, given the gravity of the situation. Bridges that would be packed right now with mid-morning or early afternoon traffic are now packed with people leaving the city by their thousands. On my way down here on a bicycle from the Upper East Side, which is about 70 blocks away from the towers, I saw a line of police vehicles and ambulances coming down a street that was cordoned off, 2nd Avenue, which is a very major thoroughfare in Manhattan, completely blocked off except for a continuous line of emergency vehicles. Police and firefighters have been off duty, have been coming in, driving Mercedes or motorcycles, just trying to get down here. I saw nurses and doctors running out of Bellevue Hospital, where many of the wounded are being taken, and flagging down vehicles, begging for rides to get down to the site of the explosions. There are armed guards now, federal marshals, U.S. marshals down here now with automatic weapons, cordoning off many of the streets, and people are being, even reporters are being pushed back farther and farther from the site. It's just a horrific scene. People are stunned. I've seen people standing on the street crying, begging police officers to let them through to get the loved ones that they know went to work this morning, but they no longer know what their condition is. I talked to one police officer who was in tears and obviously in shock. He said he was standing right in front of the tower when it came down. He told me that he had many of his colleagues had entered in there. I haven't been able to confirm this, to clear people out after the first tower went down and bombs went off inside. He thinks he's lost some of his friends and colleagues. And right now I can see another push to clear victims, to clear pedestrians and other civilians away from the site.
Steve, extremely graphic commentary on what we've witnessed there and what you're witnessing all around you. We've heard the comments from Mayor Giuliani about what we should expect in terms of a casualty number here later in the day. Has there been any more sense of what we should be prepared for here?
I've been away from my radio for some time now, but everywhere I stopped on my way down here, first to get a dust mask, so I could breathe because the air is just thick with dust, and to pick up water because I was trying to help out some of the officers here who do not have water. Nobody knows a casualty number or even is hesitating to guess. The only one who said anything at all about a hard number, and it wasn't a hard number at all, was the officer I mentioned who was standing at one of the corners actually crying, and he just said, "You don't want to go anywhere near there. I can't tell you how many people are there." He goes, "But the place was full." So we're obviously, and this is a totally uneducated guess, but would be in the thousands. I have one friend who does work in the Trade Center who, thank heavens, was late going in today, and she's desperately trying to find out if any of her employees are still down there, but she told me that there would have been thousands and thousands of people in the area and in the buildings.
Steve, we appreciate you giving us a few moments of your time, and we'll let you carry on with your day and the reporting that you're doing. We'll probably talk to you a little later on. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Peter.
Okay, Steve. Steve Irwin, a Canadian who works now in New York City, with his on-the-ground view of what's been going on. The Canadian border, we're told, is about to be sealed off between Canada and the United States. There are already indications that parts of it have been. The tunnel at Detroit-Windsor has been closed. The Ambassador Bridge between the two cities and the Blue Water Bridge linking Sarnia and the U.S. is remaining open for now. We've heard also along the New Brunswick Maine border there have been some certainly delays in any crossings there. Okay, I'm just getting a little more detail here. The latest coming out of New York suggests that there's a gas leak, obviously, where the Trade Center was, and it seems to be fueling the fire that continues there, and fire officials desperately trying to seal that off. We're also told that the U.S. Navy has ordered two of its largest aircraft carriers, the George Washington and the John F. Kennedy, to New York waters. And we're told they're heading that way now. More on the Canadian-U.S. border situation. We're joined now by Alan Waterman, who joins us from the BC Washington state border. Alan, what can you tell us about what's happening there now? Hello, is Alan Waterman on the line? We seem to have lost that cell phone connection. We'll hook it back up in a moment, and we'll check out the situation there, because traffic had been shut off. We're told that it may have just been reopened again, at least to a trickle going back and forth between the two countries at that major border crossing between southern BC and northern Washington state. Well, let's flip from that part of this continent to the other side of the world, where our Mideast correspondent Neil MacDonald joins us from Israel. Neil, well, let's start with the initial reaction there. We've already heard the comments from the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, and we are aware that Israel has taken actions with embassies around the world evacuating them. What more can you tell us?
I think probably it would be fair to say, Peter, that the mood right now in Israel and probably indeed throughout the Middle East is one of extreme foreboding. Everyone is holding their breath to find out who is responsible. People are saying if it is one of the neighboring Arab states that had anything to do with this, life will change here drastically. People are very afraid of that. A lot of people talking about leaving. There's a lot of people here in Israel, obviously, with relatives in New York. The phone lines are jammed. The Israeli Air Force is on a state of high alert. Sorry, there's interruption on the line. The Israeli Air Force is escorting any civilian aircraft coming in or out of the country. And on the Palestinian side, as you mentioned what Yasser Arafat had to say, but we've the radical Palestinian groups, some of which called just in the last couple of weeks for attacks on American interests, cannot rush fast enough to get in front of cameras to offer both denials and condemnations. We've heard from the DFLP, the PFLP, that's the Democratic and Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. One of those groups was quite active in airplane hijackings in the 70s, both denying it in the strongest terms. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin of Hamas, a man who dispatches suicide bombers into Israel, has denounced it and said he's against this sort of thing. Abu Laila, who is the provisional head of the PFLP, very, very nervous, clearly, about what is coming. Strong denials all around. Now, there is a disconnect between Arab leaders on the Arab street In Lebanon, in the large refugee camps there, Ain Hawli, Sabra, and Shatila, there has been firing into the air and dancing and celebrations of this. In Jerusalem, there was a small group of people in front of the Damascus gate of the old city, handing out sweets and toasting Osama bin Laden, some of them toasting at Saddam Hussein or whoever they think is responsible for this, but those were small groups. Nonetheless, it is unquestionably true that the United States has been marked as the enemy here over the months. There's a great deal of animosity against Americans, and whoever is responsible for this, amongst a great many Arabs, will probably be a hero.
How should we take the comments from the Taliban in Afghanistan that Osama bin Laden could not possibly have had anything to do with this? Well,
you know, as the British would say, they would say that, wouldn't they? Again, I have to stress that the feeling in this part of the world is that a bit like what was said by the Japanese after Pearl Harbor, we've awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve. Whoever is responsible is liable to face a massive retaliation, and people are just holding their breaths, hoping that it's not their people. And as I said, the Israelis, you know, if there are reports out of London by Arab journalists saying that Osama bin Laden had said in the last couple of weeks that he was planning large-scale attacks against American interests to avenge what they're siding with the Israelis in this conflict. So if there is an Arab angle to this, and everyone is afraid there is, Israel will be, one way or the other, dragged into it. And Israelis themselves as well are scared, I think it's fair to say, of what's coming, or of the escalation that everyone has been predicting in this part of the world as this uprising has continued for the past year. It's a very nervous, very tense situation.
You know, people are obviously struck by a lot of different things today, but perhaps the two main ones are the enormity of what we've witnessed that has happened, and the potential of quite staggering figures when all the numbers are counted by the end of this. That on the one hand, obviously. On the other hand, the stunning coordination of what took place here today. At least 4 hijackings, incidents where car bombs, other smaller aircraft involved, and still who knows what else may be going on. When you take that kind of coordination on a huge scale like this, surely it's got to limit the number of groups that have the potential to do something like this.
That's obviously the big question. We should probably start by saying that, harken back to what President Clinton said after the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma, which is that let's just wait and see who's responsible. But once again, if there is an Arab angle to this, and suicide attacks are a hallmark of Arab terrorism, or what is considered Arab terrorism, just running historically through who would be capable, there's obviously the bin Laden organization. Something like this. All
right. Look, Neil, sorry, I was just getting other information in my ear, but let me, having heard your analysis of this with all the obvious cautionary notes that you put in, that has certainly helped us be better informed as to what may be going on here. And the other stunning moment while Neil was talking, as we always do when somebody is talking over pictures, we put their name and where they're talking from. The juxtaposition of Neil's voice and the super, which is what we call the lettering at the bottom of the screen, saying Jerusalem, with the pictures, which if you just joined us, you may well have assumed was a situation in the Middle East. The stunning after effect of these bombs that have gone off in New York and the crashes of the aircraft into the World Trade Towers. You might have thought you were looking at the Middle East. You weren't. You were looking right here into the heart of New York City, where the 2 towers of the World Trade Center have both collapsed under the strain of the damage caused by 2 major aircraft hits on those towers, hijacked aircraft directed right into those buildings. Joining us now from Calgary, Will Engle, who is a former American Airlines pilot. And Mr. Engle, we want to try and get some sense of what may or may not have happened here this morning in terms of the pilots. A hijacked aircraft. Walk us through what is the normal procedure that you're aware of from your days as a pilot for American Airlines that a captain would go through if he was still in control of the aircraft once it was hijacked?
Okay, Peter. Basically, what the procedure is, they ask who's in charge. The pat answer is the hijacker is. We let them go ahead and assume that they've got command of that aircraft. That's first and foremost, because the first thing you don't want to do is to aggravate or make this guy feel like he's not in charge, because he's normally got a firearm. Once they take possession of the, quote, control of the aircraft, we do our transponder encode if it's possible, that being 7700. The transponder sends that information back to air traffic control. A bleep comes up on their scope, instantly telling them that we've got a situation.
Now, just let me stop you for a moment. One assumes that that transponder can be initiated without the knowledge of the hijacker?
We try to do it if as subliminally as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you just got to reach down there, and if he asks you what you're doing, I'm just trying to coordinate. I'm going to turn off the radio. I've told and sometimes we were told that, number one, turn off, tell them I'm just shutting down the radio. At that time, you can key it in. We've got a preset button normally. We push the one button. It sends a 7700 code back to the transponder. That initiates the ATC notice that we have been hijacked.
All right, let me just stop you for a moment. We've been talking in the last couple of hours as when are we going to hear something from the American government. We're told now that shortly President Bush will be making another statement. We'll obviously cover it live as soon as that takes place. It seems to suggest that he's in Louisiana right now. Must have flown there from at an Air Force base in Louisiana. Must have flown there from Florida. Let me get back to this this situation now on board the aircraft, because obviously of all the incredible pictures we've seen today, perhaps the most dramatic is of that second aircraft, appears to be a 737 going into the second tower. Now, it's awfully hard as we watch these pictures to imagine that any pilot, no matter what he had to his head, would have done this.
I cannot assume at this point that the aircrew on board the second aircraft was even alive. That's just a gut feeling with me, would be that it wouldn't happen. I think when we have a chance to study the black boxes and pull back the cockpit voice recorders, we're going to find that there was probably 2 shots in the cockpit.
So that the hijacker or hijackers would have commandeered the aircraft completely. In other words, eliminated the pilots.
They would have killed the flight crew and taken over the aircraft, and that would have been the only possible scenario that I can see of that aircraft flying directly into the building.
Have you ever contemplated such a situation as this?
Yes and no. As a captain, we all have to assume that back during the early 70s, when it was fashionable to hijack an aircraft, that it could happen to you. In the 80s, it wasn't so much, it wasn't as fashionable. The various hijackings that happened around the world, people, they saw that drastic measures were being taken to eliminate the hijackers. The Germans, for instance, they would storm the tarmac, take out the hijackers. The various governments, there was a no-play rule. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to tolerate it. And so, therefore, the hijackers, it didn't pay for them to try to hijack.
We've been comforted somewhat in the fact that there haven't been any major hijackings, certainly in North America, for some time now. And one wonders whether that's had an impact on security measures. Obviously, if these aircraft were hijacked, one of them at least out of Boston, they had to get on board their aircraft with something that was allow them to commandeer an aircraft, and if, as you speculate, the possibility of eliminating the pilots, something to do that with.
That's been, we were talking in the newsroom here about that, and I think with the security at Logan Airport is phenomenal. They do a terrific job over there. It's probably one of the tightest security airports on the East Coast. And with the amount of traffic going in and out of Logan Field, the security's always been good there. Even as a flight crew member, I remember going through there, and I had a I can't remember, it was a device in my pocket. It was a little walkie-talkie. I, as a crew member, could bypass security, and I walked through there, and I set it off, set the alarm off, and they ended up putting the wands to me and found that, and I didn't even realize it was in my pocket. And the guy, he said, "Sorry to bother you, Cap." And, you know, at that point, I thanked him, you know, well, at least you caught it, you know, and that showed me that they were on the ball. So that's got to be comforting to some people, but then again, to have this much coordination, you know, I'm sitting here looking at reports this morning, and it's phenomenal. This well orchestrated, I mean, it's hard to even put that on paper and make it, you know, put it into a flow chart and say, how could somebody pull this off?
You know, there have been a number of other aircraft incidents today, as I'm sure you're aware, the one going
Yes.
down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Flight 93.
You have to start assuming at this point that once the American authorities were, you know, fully aware of what was going on, if they had a hijacked aircraft in the air, they were going to have to make a difficult decision about what to do about that.
Exactly. And, you know, it comes at that point in time where the 1st Tactical Fighter Squadron there at Langley Air Force Base, which guards basically the East Coast and the White House, and they're in charge of the F-16s and F-15s that were up in above New York City and above Washington, D.C. this morning. And these guys, you know, they've got an enormous task, is that their order is take out the aircraft.
Captain, any other thoughts on this before we let you go?
I just, you know, my heart goes out to the crew members, their families, and all the families of the victims today. You know, whoever was, you know, the individuals that were on board the aircraft into the trade centers, you know, that's a heck of a way to go. And, you know, today is the first day, you know, it's what my dad in the mid-'60s said was rain day. This is the day the rain came.
Well, it certainly did. Captain Engel, we appreciate your time and your expertise on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Will Engel joining us from Calgary today. More information suggesting that the borders have been closed between Canada and the United States, between the United States and Mexico. How long it will actually take to make this happen, we don't know, but let's go to the border crossing at Niagara Falls, where our Joanna Remiliotis is standing by. Joanna, what can you tell us from there?
Bridge now, the Rainbow Bridge, which is one of the 3 main bridges going from southern Ontario, Niagara region into Buffalo. The wait here, officials say, is about 2.5 hours. And at this point, 2 of the bridges still remain open, but it's not for sure. It's not certain that they will remain open throughout the day. There's a tense mood here. Officials are going through everybody, asking people all kinds of detailed questions, you know, looking through cars, and they're not taking any chances. And the Air Force Reserve in this region is on high alert. All the major federal buildings in Buffalo have been evacuated, including City Hall, the Federal Reserve Building, and the Federal Building. Right now, like I mentioned earlier, the mood is tense, and the wait here right now is about 2.5 hours at the very least. That's what officials are telling us.
All right, Joanna, thanks very much. Joanna Remiliotis joining us from the Niagara Falls border between Canada and the United States. Let's go to Vancouver. Natalie Clancy standing by at the Vancouver International Airport, where the situation is likewise tense. Natalie, what can you tell us? Hello, Natalie Clancy. We've
Hi there. It's Natalie again.
just a sec. Have we got you now, Natalie?
I'm just not clear if I'm even on the line with them.
Well, we're obviously having a little trouble hooking up with Natalie. Natalie, we'll try this one more time. Natalie Clancy in Vancouver, can you hear us? No, unfortunately we can't. Let's go, let me update you on a few things here, first of all. In terms of different information that's come in, just as we were talking to Will Engel, as we continue to look at the situation in New York City. George W. Bush expected to make a statement coming out of Louisiana shortly. We heard from him earlier, said freedom itself was attacked. Freedom will be protected. Once again, George W. Bush to speak lately in a short time. We're not exactly sure when, but we'll cover it live as we continue to show you pictures from New York, some live, and also these, obviously, a repeat of the earlier devastation that took place in the American city. The border crossings we told you about, many have been closed. Others are down to a trickle and may yet be closed. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell, who is on a visit to South America, is now on his way back, as there will be emergency meetings taking place in Washington. They're under the direction right now of the Vice President Dick Cheney. But as we say, the President of the United States about to make comments soon in Louisiana, and we will go to them as soon as he makes them. Let's go back to Vancouver Airport, try that connection once again with Natalie Clancy. Natalie, what is happening at the Vancouver Airport?
Well, a few moments ago, it was a very urgent moment. An alarm went off, a very loud alarm went off in the airport, and everyone was told to evacuate immediately. So hundreds of passengers, I'm in the U.S. arrivals terminal, but hundreds of passengers ran outside, and they were all crowded before that around television sets in the airport. There have been constant announcements. We're hearing another one now. I think it's just a matter of a false alarm, because they did allow people back in the airport just a few minutes later, but it certainly gives you a sense of just how heightened people's fears here are. We've talked to many American citizens here who are trying frantically to find out more information about their relatives back home. We heard of one tale of a group of Americans who were on a flight this morning on board in Vancouver were told to get off, that they should get off because of what happened. And one of the gentlemen on the flight, his son works at the World Trade Center. Peter?
All right, Natalie, we're going to leave it at that. We appreciate that. We'll be back to you if further developments occur in Vancouver. Now, earlier today, we talked with John Thompson, a security expert at the Mackenzie Institute here in Toronto, and John has been monitoring the situation here over the last couple of hours. John, your thoughts on the latest details that we've seen?
Well, so far I'd say the indicators seem to suggest the handiwork of the network of Osama bin Laden. The attacks have been very well planned, aimed at causing a massive loss of life, which was characteristic of the World Trade Center bombing in '93, the Bahrain Tower attack in Saudi Arabia, and the African embassy bombings. And of course, there's the actual delivery of the attack, which may have been by perhaps a very small number of people. However, the Osama bin Laden network has never been known to use suicide bombers, with a single exception of the attack on a U.S. Navy warship in Yemen last year. Of course, we also know that Osama bin Laden has had an interest in attacking American targets, particularly airports, before. Remember, Ahmed Rassam was arrested as part of that network trying to cross into the United States with a load of plastic explosive, and his ultimate target was at Los Angeles Airport. But the thing here is this is much, much more than an ordinary terrorism. I said before, this may even be an attempt to it's a strategic strike at the United States. The two attacks on the World Trade Center basically stuck a spear into the United States financial system, the United States markets, in fact, the global markets. At the same time, you have the attack on the Pentagon, the attempted attack on the State Department. Right now, it's not yet confirmed, but the crash of an aircraft near Colorado suggests that someone was trying to hit NORAD, perhaps Colorado Springs or U.S. Space Command, which is an important communications hub. Those are two key targets in the Colorado area. Also, the incident in, again, this is not yet substantiated, but near Cincinnati, that's not that far from Dwight Patterson Air Force Base, which is, again, another key American military installation. And then, of course, we still haven't got information on this, but the possibility of a attack on Camp David, which is sort of the first place that a lot of key American officials would go to if they were evacuated from Washington. I mean, whoever planned these attacks planned them very, very well. And this is much more than a spree of terrorism. This is appears to be, right now, a concerted attempt to hit the United States in a very strategic manner.
Because it's so concerted and so coordinated and apparently so successful, it has to narrow down the possibilities of who could have been behind it. I hear very clearly your pointed direction towards the network of Osama bin Laden, but there probably can't be that many possibilities given this kind of coordination.
No, not that many possibilities, but there are some other players in the Middle East. There was some military-grade planning behind this attack. And I think also you notice the attacks seem to have been, there's been some attempt made to time them rather precisely as well. more details will come out on this, but maybe Osama bin Laden, maybe Saddam Hussein. It's hard to think of anybody else at this moment, but this is probably the most devastating attack that's ever been inflicted on the United States in its history.
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt about that. John Thompson, we appreciate your calm in trying to deal with this today, and your thoughts after studying what we know so far. And as we all know, more and more details are going to come out. But John Thompson joining us here in Toronto, an expert with the McKinsey Institute looking at terrorism and security matters. John mentioned one of the stories out today, the possibility that something happened in Colorado. There has been a report that there was an aircraft crash in Colorado. It hasn't been confirmed. We don't know any more about that and haven't heard anything on that for some time now. Here, let us confirm to you what we do know with certainty in terms of aircraft crashes. These are the ones we know are down, have been lost. An American Airlines flight, Boston to LA, Flight 11, that was one of the aircraft that went into the World Trade Center. American Airlines 77, Washington to LA bound, it was hijacked, crashed. United Airlines 175 from Boston to LA, 2 flights out of Boston today, both hijacked. Ironic when you heard Will Engel a few moments ago, the former American Airlines pilot, talking about how tight security is at Logan International Airport in Boston. And EUA Flight 93, a Boeing 757 from Newark to San Francisco, which crashed in a field near Pittsburgh. Still lots of details to come out. The Taliban is now holding a news conference, and we're going to go to it live right now. This is the organization with connections to Osama bin Laden saying today that he had nothing to do with this, or could not have had anything to do with it. Let's hear what they're saying.
We have criticized all forms of criticism as Afghanistan has itself faced and has become the victim of terrorism, and we are now criticizing kind of acts.
Terrorism
terrorism is terrifying and hateful hatred or hateful methods.
او دغه پیښه چې سوي د بشري پلوه خورا پراخه او لوی ناورین دی.
And this incident is from the humanitarian point of view surely a very vast and very terrifying incident.
Any question?
Any question?
Question, please. Have you received any kind of information, any kind of communication from the United States or any other organization?
The America Mutahida Ayalati یا لومړی خانم کوم رابطه درسره کړې ده؟
نه، تر اوسه پورې چا کومه رابطه نه ده کړې. ولې اوس تر ټولو مهمه خبره ده چې هغوی په ژغورنه باندې اخته دي. کېدای شي چې یوازې هغوی ته د تسلیت پیغامونه تللي وي او دا چې اسلامي امارت سره چا تماس نیولی دا خبر تر اوسه نه ده.
No contact up to now. They might be busy, or surely they are busy in the rescue operation. So they need condolence, but up to now, no communication from them.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks on the United States?
Taliban په مرحله واره توګه په امریکا باندې دغه حملې وړاندې.
موږ د توریزم ټول انواع همیشه غندلې ده. د پخوا څخه په دې باره کې پالیسي ښکاره وه.
Our policy was very clear from the very beginning, and we have criticized, and even now we criticize terrorism in all its forms.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden last year, هیڅ قسم ته یا هر کوم یو قسم ته لاس درلودنه په سپېڅلي صورت راغلی.
تر اوسه پورې چا په هغه باندې رسمي تور هم نه دی لګولی.
No, up till now, no one has blamed or accused him formally.
The Taliban have said that they will maintain Mr. bin Laden without communication, unable to communicate. Can you be convinced at this time that your policy of keeping him without communication has been effective in recent months?
طالبان ژمنه کړې چې سامان لادن سره د هر قسم په اتصالاتي امکانات بدلون لري چې تاسو دا خبره تاییدوي چې اوس هم هغه پالیسي په دې باندې عملي ده
موږ په پالیسي کې کوم تغیر نه ورغلی.
No change in our policy in this regard.
Do you think the policy is working, Mr. Mutwakiel?
او دا پالیسي کار هم کوي اثر یې کړی دی
ته دې خبره ده.
Naturally.
Suspicions obviously turn to Osama bin Laden. In the media, he's been mentioned as possibly having a hand in this. Are you concerned that Afghanistan could be on the receiving end of recriminations of reprisals, of responded attacks?
توجه یا ګمان دې ته راوړي مطبوعاتو یا میډیا د نوم هم اخیستی ده آیا تاسو داسې توقع کوئ چې افغانستان به د دې عکس العمل وویني یا د عکس العمل هدف وګرځي؟
زه فکر کوم چې د هغه نوم اخیستی هم یوازې به د پخوا څخه چې چون په هغه تفسیرو کې ډېر نوم راتلی خوله مو خرڅوي.
I think that even if someone has taken his name in the media, it might be just because his name was repeatedly mentioned in the past in the comments. Just for this reason, his name might have been repeated.
Just the second half of the question, though, are you concerned that Afghanistan could receive reprise attacks?
تاسو چې یو نگرانی لرئ چې افغانستان به د دې عکس العمل وویني؟
موږ کوم مشکل دی موږ هڅه نه ګورو ځکه چې کوم دلیل یې
We don't see or foresee any difficulty in this regard because there is no argument or no reason for it.
If it were to happen, if there were to be attacks, what would the implications be of such a situation?
If there were attacks from...
As Jonathan said, if there were to be reprisals against Afghanistan, what would the implications of that be?
چې په دغه یو پیښه وشي عکس العمل ښکاره شي د هغه اغېزې به څه وي؟
هغه به د هغه وخت سره ګورو خو ما مخکې ویل چې ټول انواع د تروریزم هغه په دولتي شکل باندې که چېرته یو هېواد بل هېواد ولید طبعا هغه دولتي تروریزم.
It is a little bit earlier to say at this stage, but as we said that we criticize all forms of criticism. So if Afghanistan is attacked, then we can call it state terrorism.
There's also been concerns expressed about Arab mercenaries fighters in Afghanistan and allegations that there may be an Arab connection to these acts of terrorism have also been raised. Can you talk to those concerns? Can you rule out any Arab links?
په افغانستان کې عربي اتباع یا بعض داسې ګروپونه چې د افغان دنیا خطر احساسوي تاسو د هغو لاس درلودنه په دې پیښه کې هم ردوئ؟
زه فکر کوم چې دا پیښه ډېره لویه پیښه ده او دا به داسې چا پسې منسوبول چې زړه ته مو ونه لوېږي چې دا کار وکړي دا به کیدای شي چې یو ناانصافي وي یو څوم تخمین ونه
It is a very big and enormous incident. So just to connect it with some people that even one's logic cannot even accept it. So in my opinion, it might not be a justifying.
Mr. Mutwakiel, are you surprised that the United States has received this sort of attack?
د امریکا متحده ایالاتو چې د داسې حملاتو هدف وګرځېد تاسو په دې باندې حیران شوي یاستئ؟
طبیعي خبر ده چې د خپل نوې دا پیښه کېدای شي د امریکا په تاریخ کې ډېره لویه پیښه وي د هر چا لپاره طبیعي خبر د حیرانۍ وړ ده.
Naturally, because this might be the only and the unique kind of incident in the history of the United States. So, like anyone is also...
What I'm getting at is do you think the United States has perhaps invited this, given its policy around the world and the growing resentment that some forces feel towards the United States? So what I'm suggesting is that the United States